Fox News host Sean Hannity is begging Robert F. Kennedy Jr. what about running as a third party, which Sean Hannity cynically knows is likely to help Donald Trump get elected. Although Bobby Kennedy Jr. has plenty of MAGA people that like him, so we'll talk about what that would look like. But let's take a look at this. As many of you know, if you've been watching this week, the strong challenge to Joe Biden presented by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has basically evaporated by 40%. At one point, Bobby Kennedy Jr. polling about 20% in the Democratic primary, now down to 12 or even 11 and change. So the campaign's not going particularly well. Bobby Kennedy Jr. appeared last night with Sean Hannity, and Hannity insists multiple times, what about maybe running third party? You know, the Democratic Party's being very unfair to you. What about running third party? Take a listen.
Your campaign manager, Dennis Kucinich, actually said the following in a letter to the DNC, that they created a class, unfortunately, of pledged delegates called party leaders, elected officials, essentially the same as superdelegates due to the amount of control the party exercises over elected officials. Basically saying you can't get a fair shake, that the deck is stacked against you. Joe Biden already pulled out of Iowa, pulled out of New Hampshire, because he thinks he'd do better at starting in South Carolina. You know, if you're not going to get a fair shot with the Democratic Party, and you're not getting even a fair shot in the mainstream media, you were very complimentary of Fox. We appreciate it, that we're being fair and we give you a voice. My question to you is, why stay with the Democratic Party? Would you consider third party? Would you consider the no labels party or any party?
Well, right now we're still arguing with the DNC and trying to get them to hold actually a fair election. As you pointed out, they have disenfranchised now all of the voters essentially in Iowa and New Hampshire, the states in which President Biden ran fourth the last time around. So they're punishing the states that did not vote for President Biden the last time by basically disenfranchising the voters, making it so that if you live in New Hampshire, you cannot vote for anybody but President Biden this time around. They're trying to do something else, which I think is much more alarming, which is they're trying to pass a rule. They're debating right now to pass a rule, and it's almost certain to pass, that voters in Georgia will be disenfranchised.
The music.
If they vote for any of if they vote for me or for Marianne Williamson.
Well, let me ask you that. Will you consider running on another party ticket?
Well, right now I'm focused on trying to run as a Democrat. This is my home. This is the place I grew up.
They don't seem very friendly to you.
I'm hoping to make the Democratic Party work.
When Sean Hannity's nicer to you than they are, you got a problem. You would agree with that?
I didn't
not
hear
treating you fairly. Why stay with them? If they're not going to treat you fairly, why?
Well, I'm hoping that they will. I'm hoping that they will at least allow a fair vote in the states outside of New Hampshire and Iowa.
All right. So listen, Hannity is cynically assuming that if Bobby Kennedy Jr. runs third party, he pulls more votes from Biden than from Trump, and therefore helps Donald Trump win. It's the reverse scenario of the Trump third party scenario. I've explained before, the math is relatively straightforward with Trump. If DeSantis were somehow to win this nomination, seems unlikely at this point, but imagine that it were to happen. If DeSantis somehow wins the nomination and Trump says, I'm furious, I'm going to run third party, sore loser laws aside, whatever. Imagine Trump gets on the ballot in enough states. If only a fraction of the typical Republican voter says, hey, you know what, instead of DeSantis, who's the actual nominee, I'm going to go with Trump. If only a fraction of them do that, it could throw so many states that would otherwise be close to Joe Biden. Now, Hannity's assumption here is that the same would happen in reverse if Bobby Kennedy Jr. were to run third party. Oh, Trump versus Biden, going to be very close in a lot of states. Imagine that in Florida, or maybe a better example would be like Arizona. Biden might win by 3, except if Bobby Kennedy Jr. runs and the people who support him are mostly Democrats, say, hey, 5% of us are going to go from Biden to Bobby Kennedy. It pulls just enough support for Trump to win. It is possibly true that that would happen. The one counterpoint to this is that even though Bobby Kennedy Jr. is nominally running as a Democrat, and it's true that he comes from a historically Democratic family and all of it, that is all absolutely true. Bobby Kennedy Jr. is interesting to a relatively high number of MAGA people who love the anti-vax but don't necessarily love Trump's bluster. And so I think it's probably still the case that Bobby Kennedy third party helps Trump slightly more than it would help Biden. But we shouldn't understate the number of MAGA people who actually like Bobby Kennedy. And as we know, he's being supported by some major Republican donors. And even though he is nominally a Democrat, there is a significant amount of MAGA and Republican support that makes up his constituents. So we know why Hannity's doing it. He's cynically encouraging third party because he thinks it helps Trump. That may indeed be the case, but it may be by a closer margin than we thought.